How much can you grow? How lucky are you? Can you make your own luck? Jupiter is the paternal god, the happy grandpa who you can get an inheritance from if you're the good child who impresses him. Jupiter is the force that asks, why stop here when the whole world is out there for you? You see, Jupiter has just come up from the underworld of Pluto and Scorpio and has done the dark depths. But as with Sagittarius, now it's time to explore in the daylight, enjoying the warmth of the sun, expanding, meeting new people. It's about being optimistic and trusting and thinking that the universe supports you even when you're suffering. Thinking that you can overturn that suffering because you have power. It's also the house, sign, placement of narrowly escaping death. I have Jupiter on my ascendant and 5 planets in Sagittarius, including my moon and my midheaven, so it's hard to list the amount of times that I've narrowly avoided death. But just one story I'll share with you is a friend was driving me home from school when I was 16, and we were at a 4-way intersection, but it was only a 2-way stop, if you get my drift. And that's typical New Jersey. So she went ahead at the stop sign thinking that the person was going to stop, that was coming towards us in a T. And that person did not stop because they didn't have a stop sign, and they were also speeding in a 25 mile per hour zone, and they were going over 40 miles per hour. Now, if you Google the chances of being killed when hit by a car at 40 miles per hour, the odds are about 90%. Now, this might go for people who are outside of a car, but the car did hit the passenger side of the Chevy Cavalier that my friend was driving, right on the passenger side. The airbags came out. I could see the door was dented in next to me. So why wasn't I crushed? Why did I only have a few bruises? I'm not sure, but I just started asking my friend if she was okay, and she was stunned. Obviously she was screaming. And the other thing, though, was she looked at me and said, well, I thought you'd be hurt. The car didn't even get near me, but it hit the passenger side. So after that, I didn't think much of it, but I do reflect back on it as one of the times in my life when I narrowly escaped death. Now, some people say that makes you feel like you're invincible, or it spoils you, from a higher mind perspective. But I disagree. I think from my higher mind perspective, it teaches you to appreciate life. Hey, you're not dead today. What will you do with your time? Do you ask yourself this question every day? This is Kevin MacLeod with Quasi Motion. Sagittarius summed up is, I set a goal, I reach the goal, I go to the next goal. Sagittarius is the 9th house of focused and henceforth expanded spiritual path. It's the house of soul guidance. Do you set goals? What do you do to try to reach them? Are they attainable goals? Are they boring goals? Are they goals you know you'll reach, so they're not really goals at all? They're just things that you do every day? Maybe there are many obstacles to your goals, and overcoming the obstacles for the next generation has become the goal in itself. What brings you luck? Is it your relationships? Where do you have the easiest time expanding? And where do you feel constricted? Where does Jupiter bless you with higher understanding and higher expectations? Do you believe you can grow, or do you stay stuck? Do you feel there's something giving you lift? Or have you given up on your spirit guides and your place in the universe? It can be difficult sometimes explaining the concept of spiritual materialism to people. I know I can't actually say that phrase to people without being misunderstood. I mean, if you Google the phrase, you're going to get a thesis from a guy who completely takes a different route to understanding the two words combined, spiritual materialism. But I'm leaning on a very philosophical definition of materialism, which is embodiment, things that are materially available to us, things that we have that we can use, that we can do to uplift ourselves.
My name's Audrey.
Something that exists here and now, not promises, but ways to navigate life and suffering by believing that you can make this world better and that you can create new worlds. So spiritual materialism doesn't just mean accumulating worldly wealth. That would be a really bad misunderstanding of it. And it doesn't mean, I have to relinquish my possessions so I can get a reward. No, actually, when I think of parts of religion which are not patriarchal and the parts of spiritual practices that have been used by women and non-binary people, there is no framework in these dialogues where we hear people who come from marginalized communities that are not supposed to be successful or support themselves. And that took me a while to figure out. Let me explain. You supporting yourself is sometimes seen as selling out, and I think this is a wrong way of viewing it, because when you sell out, it's really just a way of saying that you're able to support yourself, So in so many ways, you no longer need help, and sometimes when you need so much help, it can be crippling to you, and then you're really not living at all. People are supposed to live, to be spiritual, this ascetic lifestyle, and it helps no one if you're helpless. So how do you help yourself? Maybe you've given up hope in the world. I don't know what your situation is. And academia is good for that. I'll just say, when you are in certain systems, that's kind of their business, is to, I mentioned in I think my first podcast, is just being suspicious, and you just stop at being suspicious of everything. And that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be considered a full, quote, academic. And I'm kind of kidding here, because nobody is just one thing. We're all a bunch of different things and have different parts of ourselves. But I'm a hybrid, so I am an academic, but it's hard to find answers in a discourse when you're not taught about recovery and reclamation. Sagittarius rules higher mind wisdom, not the kind that's taught in higher education, so it would make sense that I was called to discuss what I just did with you about spiritual materialism. And as someone who spends a lot of time in formal education and has spent a lot of time in formal education, I know not all the answers are there. The egos involved are just amazing at times, trying to fight to see who is the most educated in the conventions But if you don't have any higher wisdom, what's the point? And this is where the sensibilities of faith and justice come in. You can try working them into the conventional curriculum, but the structure of formal education has inequality built into it as it traps knowledge inside a privileged space. That's just the way it is. It doesn't mean I'm gonna, leave higher education. Probably not. I mean, looking at the trajectory of my life and what I've done so far, but it doesn't mean that I don't see some of these things. And it doesn't mean that I can't use my higher mind, thinking of faith and justice, to try to change this situation a bit. But it is good to recognize things for what they are. To contact the intuitive mind, you have to think of the world of the soul. Consider you've lived before, and you will live again, not in this life, right? You get this life to do what you'll do with this life. And you have this body, and next time you will have a different body. But that should make you work harder, not work less. It should make you more invested, not less invested. Jupiter is the quest for knowledge that can't be contained. It's the knowledge that will keep searching far beyond, expanding out into the universe. This is Queridas with Creyente. Sometimes Jupiterian thought can get too abstract. It's not rigid like Saturn's no-nonsense approach or contained like Virgo's perfectionism. No, it's transpersonal. There's nothing earthy about it. It's fire. True healing cannot happen without the higher mind. How much do you get into symbology? How do you let the universe communicate with you? Jupiter is the chance to move past old limitations, childhood limitations. It's the idea that you were born as one thing, but you can transmute yourself into something else. And when you become an adult, no one's going to ask you right off, hey, what happened to you when you were a kid? A lot of times you meet people and they just assume that the person they're meeting was always like that. That people don't change over time, that you were just born the way that you are. And sometimes, in some ways, that's true. But sometimes you have to fight to become who you are. And you'll continue fighting. But what people see in the Jupiterian sense is what you can do in the world. That's what people see when they see you. They see how far you're going to go for your goals. Do you ever go too far? That's a common Jupiter trope, excess. Thinking you can go further than you can, overestimating your abilities, being too optimistic. Hey, it happens. It's kind of like that annoying person who tells you to just be positive when you're about to become homeless and your parents just died and you got diagnosed with a terminal illness. But that's the story of Job, right? In the Bible. Being tested by God so much, everything's taken away from you, and that's the test, is are you going to say, I give up? Or are you going to keep living? When things happen to you, the question is, are you going to be buoyant or will you sink? Yes, things will happen to you, and sometimes you will sink. At one point in your life, something will happen to you and you'll die. And that's just life. But will you die fighting? Will your life have been worth it? I had a classmate once who passive-aggressively told me that I tried to do too much with a class project. And classic me, I quipped back, well, I'd rather do too much than nothing at all. And that often describes my feeling on the Jupiter influence in my life. I've gotten used to people being completely ignorant about who I am because of the, Jupiter qualities I have. I can be optimistic no matter what happens to me. I've already told you my philosophy. It's a philosophy of staying afloat and staying buoyant. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that anyone not willing to get to know me doesn't deserve my time, help, optimism. Why not give that to someone who wants it and appreciates it? Some people also come into your life and see that you have a lot to give. And they try and act like they don't see that and they don't see how generous you are, but they like to take. And if you don't set limits, all they'll do is take. And you have to recognize that you're not just a wellspring for people to take from. It's up to you to protect your space. This is Sound the Encounter with Mina.
Yalla buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah yalla 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 buku mashallah.
In medical astrology, Jupiter rules the liver, feet, growth, the pituitary gland, and Sagittarius rules the hips, thighs, also the liver, and the sciatic nerve. Now, if you notice, these are all body parts, body pieces that can malfunction with excess or can represent expanding. And also, right, the feet represents going to new places. Pituitary gland, obviously, growth, right? When it comes to associated tarot cards, I think of the Wheel of Fortune. And the lesson of the Wheel of Fortune is that you have to accept adversity in life, all the ups and downs, because if you were to only have good times, you become unappreciative of everything that you have. Sometimes the contrast is what you need, not to make excuses for injustices in the world. That's not where I'm going here, because that can be part of your life mission, is to help with those injustices and have faith that you have enough power and control to affect change. But when times are good, you have to enjoy them and not become complacent. You have to be thankful for those things and thankful that you are alive. Sometimes when things are bad, it means that they're going to get better and that you will expand eventually, and you just have to weed it out and do the best you can in the interim. Don't just accept what's given to you, but also participate. Help yourself expand. Don't just hope for things to get better. Be active. Sagittarius is fire, mutable fire, which means it knows how to use the natural flow to kindle energy. Jupiter amplifies the brilliance of your sun and the rest of your chart for that matter, but will you let it? This is Nashaz with Jurjina. Take care, listeners.